tell me how you found out about Brain Tap, first of all.
So I the lady that my chiropractor, integrative medicine lady, who is also an acupuncturist, she put it on my head. And then independently of that, I was Googling, I think I was Googling something for my son, a magnet field, like a mat that you like. And then I found Brain Tap.
Oh, great.
And then I saw it in her practice, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna do it.
Well, good. So what were you using it for? What was your intent when you purchased it?
You know, I'm a bio and life hacker, I would say, and I'm always looking for and I'm also, so it's not super rigid. I do things, I try. I also think the body needs impulses to adapt and keep learning. And, you know, I meditate, I do a priming practice in the morning, but I noticed that like with my yoga practice, I could do it by myself, but being in a yoga studio for an hour, it's hot, there is an instructor, someone tells me what to do. I just function, and I think most humans function very well that way. And I put that thing on my head. It feels good. And you know, I would love to know a little bit from you, like what's the research? How did you find it? What do the two voices do? What does the music do? What do the lights do in the brain? I'm just curious.
Yeah. Well, let's take one at a time. And then definitely one of the questions I saw was, would I be willing to be on your podcast for sure, or Instagram Live? We'd love to do that. So we can work that out later. But yeah, let's start with, first of all, what is the dual voice? Why are we doing that? So people might be wondering, what in the world are they talking about? So what we do is the brain, because in the real world, we're processing a lot of information, but our brain becomes fixated on how it filters it. Right now, as we're listening, our brain is actually our ears, if you will, but it's really our brain is processing 25,000 pieces of information through our auditory channels. But our brain is really good at filtering out what's meaningful to us, what's important. But if Kat, you and I were at a restaurant, we're eating and having a good time, and then somebody 3 tables over says biohacking, we wouldn't hear any other part of the conversation, but we'd hear that because our brain is much more, let's say, productive than we give it credit for. It's processing all that information, but we get in a habit, and just like we get in habits, our brain starts filtering out things. Like we might have a loved one that always says, you never listen to me, because the brain discounts what they're saying or whatever, and so it doesn't make it valuable. So what we had to do was we have to bring in information that's valuable. So what we did is, and the brain learns just like we do under stress. So we can learn under good stress, which is called eustress, or we can learn under really high stress conditions, right? They say crisis doesn't make the man, it reveals the man, right? Or the woman, it doesn't matter. You know, when you're under, so what happens is, what happens when we're totally stressed out? How does our brain operate? Well, we know that our brain shuts down. In fact, some people to the degree that they actually pass out. You know, because the brain's saying this is too much information, too much going on. So what we started playing around with, and this was back in the 80s, when I was the voice of a product called the MC Square, which was my first portable light and sound machine. And we wanted to have something, we wanted to engage the two hemispheres. How do we keep them awake? And there's a technique in therapy where 2 therapists would work on one person. They actually call it the confusion technique. And what happens is one would talk in one ear, one would talk in the other. And the brain literally makes a story out of those 2 messages, just like it does with binaural beats. It creates its own storyline, because the brain is always looking for meaning. It's always looking for what's the reason behind this. So when you're listening to my voice go through the middle of your brain, that's more of a logical linear journey, you know, relax your feet, your ankles, you know, doing a body scan, maybe something like that. And then the voice in the right ear might say, I wonder how comfortable you'd be if you take a deep breath and just relax. And so the brain goes, what? What's that? What's it going on? So this brain lights up. What we found on the EEG is when this brain lights up, it'll stay open for a while, but then it'll shut back down. Then this, speaking to this here, I might say, Isn't it wonderful how easy it is to just relax? I might say something like that. Then the brain goes, what's going on over there? So it lights up this side of the brain. And so we're doing that back and forth, right? And pretty soon the brain goes, we're just going to stay awake.
Yeah.
And we call this the awakened mind based on the work of Ann Weiss. She wrote the book called The Awakened Mind. And she talked about primary brain waves that we need. So primarily, this is teaching us that when we return back to our everyday life, even under stress, we're training the brain to stay active. Now, we have this part of our brain up here called the frontal lobe, which has to do with executive functioning, right? So that part of our brain literally shuts down under stress, the part we need the most. But what it does, it doesn't want you thinking. It just wants you to turn and burn because it thinks there's a saber-toothed tiger chasing you or something like that. Because these bodies literally were designed to be in the Serengeti, not in a building working behind a computer for, 8 to 10 hours a day, but we're meant to be out there hunting and gathering, soaking up the sun, taking our naps in the middle of the afternoon next to the zebras, not doing, what we do all day. I mean, we're pushing our nervous system to the limits, and we haven't really exercised our nervous system. So we call this brain fitness. So think about it like we have just the algorithms. We have sounds like that. You've probably seen them on the app. They just hear the pink noise, the white noise, and the lights and guide you through the process. That's like the lowest level neuro training. Now, the next level neuro training is we introduce sound, right? We're going to introduce music. Now, music has its own category of science. It's called the Mozart effect. And they know that if you have a child, or if you wanted to learn something, you're reading a book, if you can play this Baroque kind of classical music, or some of the easy listening that's out there now, that's relaxing music, doesn't have the drum beats, and basically puts you into an alpha state. That's why we call it 10 cycle music, 10 cycle being alpha. What we know is the brain just basically is smarter in that. So it tunes it up. We're not as smart in beta, because in beta, where we're awake, we have a lot of slippage, stress. It's like going to a party and you get introduced to 6 people and they all say their name, and then everybody disperses. And then later one walks up and you're going, oh God, I know her name, but you can't remember. And then when they walk away, it pops into your brain, because when you're relaxed, it does that. So we want to train the brain. So that dual voice is actually training the brain. So then when you return to your everyday life, this conversation's easy. You were just processing 3 different conversations in your head and making sense out of it. So, in that, what's amazing with that process is we have people coming back all the time. I really think it's cool the way you keep changing that session. We're not changing the session. You're changing it based on your attitudes and beliefs at that moment. You're hearing different things. It's kind of like watching a movie and somebody said, did you see that mark over the door and what it meant or whatever? And then you watch the movie again, you go, I didn't even notice that before. People will notice the hidden messages that are in there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Amazing. And so I get that for, let's say, the states, the internal states of the brain, and how I feel in my mindset and relaxation. How does it work for? I'm always also like I'm almost 50, and I'm trying to biohack my biological clock and just deny aging, and so I'm also listening to the weight sessions. How does it work for the body? And when you say, and you just, I drink water, as you told me in those sessions, and that the weight losing and becoming a fat burning machine. I love to believe it.
Right. So what happens is, most people don't know this, but your liver produces sugar, right? Yeah. So you might not be eating sugar, but you have one stressful event. That one stressful event is more than a Snickers bar, because the liver produces the sugar thinking that because it's a stressful event, because you put a toxin into your body. And so with a thought, not a physical thing, you didn't eat the candy bar. You basically thought the stressful event, maybe it was a bad phone call, or maybe it was an event you missed, or something was going on, and you let yourself get stressed out and you spun out about it. Well, that's more fattening than chocolate. So number one, our body works best in a non-resistant state. So the more stressed we are, like if I took my fist and I ball it up and I squeeze it, I'm causing resistance here. Now when I open up, the blood flows into that area. I feel the tingling sensation. That blood flow and circulation represents the parasympathetic system. The tightness represents the sympathetic. If we get locked in sympathetic drive, which there's people out there that will identify with this, one stressful event and the day's ruined. They can't get back. They can't get back to focus. They go, I had a bad call this morning. I just can't get my stuff together. And then finally, it might be a day or 2 days. Finally, they shake it. They're better. And then something else happens. And then the nervous system gets what we call neurologically locked. It doesn't know how to shift gears out of that fight or flight, that what we call, you're just you're like a special forces person. You're just really diligent. You're just looking at everything. And so what happens within the body is we're going to relax the body, get the flow of information. I mean, with one example is like if you watch the Olympics or the runners in the Olympics, they're running a race that when we were kids, we might be doing this, running as fast as we can. But you watch them, they're just gracefully running. It looks like they're hardly even trying, and they're running, as fast as anyone has ever ran in their life, because the body works better in a relaxed state. Yeah. So we're going to relax the body, get innate intelligence to take over. And your body, you can either be a sugar burner or you can be a fat burner. Okay. Yeah. So what we're trying to do is get you to make the decisions to be the fat burner is a natural state of our body because our brain uses fat, right? That's why the keto diet's so big right now, and people doing intermittent fasting and all of these things that are going on is because that's best for the brain. Yeah. So if we can, the other thing is that think of your body like a hard drive. And in the old days, we used to have to take our hard drives and we would defrag them. We would have to reorganize them and file them. Now the system does it in the background. We don't see it. But in our brain as a conscious individual, we need to defrag sometimes because there might be that one person we're really mad at still, or we don't know why we can't have this food, but other people can, or whatever the reason is, our brain plays all these tricks with us. And so when you get focused on, we want you to focus on the health of your body. Then your weight will simply be a byproduct of your behaviors. If you focus on the weight, sometimes that becomes a deterrent. Totally. So my dad was 400 pounds at one time. My mother was almost 350. So I know what it's like to grow up in a house where people are overweight. And, if I ate like they did, then they were all processed foods. That's all. I mean, they thought when Hamburger Helper came out, this was like gold. This was so easy because we had 9 kids, whatever could be made in a big pot, that was cooking at the porterhouse. And we had to work on that. And we only have right now one sister that really struggles with her weight because every once in a while she just decides that she pretends she's not, she tells you she's doing everything right. But the reality is that when people are with her, they go, no, we see you doing this. We see you do, the results leave clues. Now, sometimes it's when the body gets out of balance. So far, the nervous system gets so far out of balance that you have to take some radical steps. Like you have to go on maybe a keto diet, or you have to do something to break up the pattern because we don't really need as much food as we think. Yes. If you were in India, the Indian traditions, they would tell you to be healthy, you have to have 1 meal. If you want to be occasionally sick, you have 2. If you want to be sick all the time, have 3 meals. And then as we get older, we eat less. I mean, look at our pets. I mean, if our dog's overweight, we just, you don't get your dinner tonight until you get thin again. But we don't do that to ours. And but I think we have to do it. We know that there are foods that will kill our pets, but will not kill us because we have some kind of intelligence that neutralizes some of those other poisons. But I think that we can survive on a lot less if it's the right foods, if it's the nutrition rich and dense foods. The problem we have right now is what used to take, just using broccoli as an example, we used to be able to get almost all the, good phytonutrients we needed from a plate of broccoli or something. Now it would take like 6 plates to get it, there's just nothing in our food anymore. So you have to supplement in a way that serves you and, get the water soluble kind of vitamins and minerals that your body needs. I think the biggest thing people are missing for weight loss is minerals. I have a friend of ours. He's actually talks a lot about brain tap. He wrote the book, Get Off Your Acid. If you haven't read that book, Daryl Joffrey, he also wrote the book, Get Off Your Sugar. And he talks about brain tap throughout, Get Off Your Sugar throughout, because we helped him with his sugar addiction. So then he wrote the book, to get off it. Because the first thing is find out what your big trigger foods are or your trigger emotions. Work on those. And with BrainTap, you probably noticed we have over 200 sessions just for weight loss. And
Yeah.
most of them are symptom specific. Like, for instance, somebody might do well Monday through Friday, but then on the weekends, their wheels fall off and they gain all their weight back, because it seems to be much easier to gain weight than lose it, right? You can gain that 3 or 4 pounds back in a weekend where it took you 3 weeks to get it off. So we have a session called Weekend Weight Loss. We have one that's called Turn Diet Saboteurs into Diet Supporters. So if you look at what's going on in your life and you take that inventory and are honest and say, oh, here's the session. That's what our coaches would do. Like the coaches that use BrainTap, they will work with somebody and they'll coach them, but then they'll say, you know what? Here's the session we'll pair it with this session this week. Listen to this session. Let's really have this happen. And sleep, I don't know how you're sleeping now, but the sleep is so much a part of all of this. So think of sleep as your superpower incubator. So if you don't get to sleep, you don't get your superpowers tomorrow. You basically know you have them, but somebody took your tights and cape, and you're not able to save the world that day because you don't have the energy. And that also has to do with how the flow of your nervous system works, because everything gets reset during sleep, and you get to build up your neurotransmitter bank account. So your mood stays constant. You have all the electrical components in your brain and all the chemical components in your body that you need to ward off the stresses, because we're going to have stress. If anybody tells you they're going to teach you a stress reduction program for your life, they're not saying it right. You need to, your life's always going to be stressful. It's how do you handle it?
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. It's so interesting. So you talked about sleep as the superpower incubator. I have this. I'm a biohacker. I'm also a coach, by the way, an executive coach. And I talk to people mostly, and people talk to me mainly. But this guy measures my deep sleep.
Yeah.
It's an Aura ring.
Oh yeah, great.
And I love it, but I always say I sleep well, I sleep good, but I don't have enough deep sleep. And I think it started. I have an 11-year, almost 12-year-old, and a 13-year-old boy, and I think the 11-year-old was born with cystic fibrosis, and it was just a big crisis in our life. I think I don't sleep deep anymore since I have them, because I'm like, my nervous system is always a little bit, I'm not in a fight flight lock anymore, I think. And so I really made some big changes. I put like a corporate career on the side because it didn't work with being a mom as well. Or the mom that I wanted to be, let's say, and also the work that my husband did, and the puzzle didn't fit. So I stopped that. I build in a lot more space, but I think it's also, I build it up over 15, 20 years. So I'm going to take probably a few years to build it down. But my deep sleep is really, and I'm trying the programs on deep sleep and theta brain waves. And
in the morning, are you doing, well, we find to really get your sleep right, if you could do it for 21 days, wake up in the morning, do one of the wake up sessions like the AM in the lifestyle section. That will wake up the brain. It actually triggers a brainwave called SMR, which is sensory motor rhythm. That's the cognition brainwave. And if we were there to measure your brain, I'd probably find that you wake up with a lot of delta activity. So we need to we call it digital coffee for a reason, because it wakes up the brain. And then in the middle of the day, if you did the brain fitness series, just for 21 days, there's 7 of those. And that's basically, those are also SMR trainings, which means we're going to train that brain that keeps your brain going. And then at night, whether you use the headset or you just use your earbuds, I would listen to one of the Delta trainings, the music only ones that drop you off. And you might try it without using the lights one night, see what happens, because maybe some people have, like if you're running hot, like your nervous system is already supercharged, and then we give you light therapy, you're getting more, because we're giving you photic energy. So those photons are being absorbed by the chromophores in your body, and then it's giving you energy, just like you would in the morning, because we're using 470 nanometer and 633 nanometer light through the ears and eyes. In most people, it's not a problem, but for about less than 10%, we find that they actually sleep better at night if they don't use the lights, but they just listen to the sound part of it. So you might try that just to see.
In the morning, I do the brain fitness. Sorry, that's the AM.
There's an AM series.
Yeah,
AM. And there's 10 different ones. So you just kind of rotate through them for the next 21 days. And waking up in the morning is the most important for sleeping at night. So, because if your brain's dysregulated all day long and you try to go to sleep, it's not enough time for it to regulate. But if we can get it right in the morning, there's the saying, win the morning, win the day. And so we created those. They have a little bit more brain training to balance the brain, because the dysregulation that happened over the years of stress, we need to get that brain back balanced. And that's what we find. Once somebody starts doing that in the morning, he has the energy. And then in the afternoon, if you do the reboot, so the brain doesn't get overtired. It's just like any other system. If it gets exhausted, it starts to dysregulate. And that causes fear and anxiety and stress. So we don't want that. And those are just emotions. They might not even be attached to anything. And some people go, I have this anxious feeling, I don't know what it is. I can tell you, if I measured your brain, 99% of the time it's going to be that your brain's out of balance, because the information is flowing. All this information flows into our brain at one time, the pictures, the sounds, all of our creation, all of reality. As another example, we take in 1,000 pieces of information through our eyes every second, but we only act again on less than 20 of them. Yeah. We render 80% of our reality, which means we're not even, reality is happening too fast. So our brain is making stuff up, in filling in the details. And to the degree that we were all born with didactic photographic memories, but then we started reading, and we now know it's tied right to reading, that reading caused our brain to fracture, and we no longer have access. That's still there, but the stress of not knowing, like we put so much pressure on ourselves to not, if we know something or if we can answer a question. And, when you're sitting through all those problem solving calls with your coaching clients, your brain's working overtime, and so you're going to be using, as a coach, you're going to be using a lot more of your whole brain. Hopefully, you're here listening to the problem, you're solving it, or you're helping them to come up with creative solutions. So you're basically working double time to what they're doing, because you're not only listening, but you're trying to come up with what would a good coach do, and whatever your format is. So all of that is and your brain uses 25% of the energy of the system, but it can use up to 85%. And so when you're talking about, like, when people are in deep thought and they can't move and things like that, it's because the brain will hijack all of the energy to finish its task. It's the only reason we're here is to carry our brain around and observe the world and interact with it and do our thing. So it's not just the brain up here either. It's our heart brain. We have the 4,000 different neurocells in our heart, and we have the gut brain connection. So these three kind of act like a together work to create this harmonics that brings body health.
Yeah, amazing. So I'm always experimenting and looking at the data, and I got some really amazing deep sleep after my first session in my hot yoga studio after COVID, like 3 or 4 weeks ago. I just slept 2.5 hours, deep sleep, and often it's like 13 minutes, 19. How do you explain that?
Well, yoga itself is really, we always tell people to start yoga, Tai Chi, or dancing, because it's so good for the nervous system. The breathing and moving, all negative emotions have one thing in common, right? They don't breathe. Think of anger, fear, frustration, anxiety. There's no breath there. So you can't dance or do yoga or Tai Chi without breathing, or you look like an idiot, right? You can't do it. You'll fall over, because it's all about flow states. So yoga, and I've done a lot of yoga over the years. I trained with Yogi Bhajan for 5 years with Kundalini yoga back when I was younger. I still like that style of yoga because I like the trips it puts your brain on. But the main thing it does is it prepares your brain for meditation. So you did the work, and then you did the actual practice. That's what's supposed to happen with yoga. A lot of people think yoga is just a workout, but yoga in its purest form, like when we just had a a published study that's in PubMed now that I was part of that did a thing on yogic breathing. We did it with AIMS Institute in India. They used our HRV system and was published and showed that how breathing affects the autonomic nervous system. So you were able to down-regulate using breath to do that. And so that might be something that you might want to remember before you do the brain tap. Maybe start to prepare yourself a little bit with some of the breathing just to remember, because once you remember it, the brain can do it very fast. You know, like when a yogi or whatever goes into samadhi, they don't have to prepare. They've done it so many times. They just take a few breaths and they're there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I got the so hum.
Mm-hmm.
It immediately brings me into a certain state, which is interesting. Where do I find the article, the study? I love that.
If you look up my name on PubMed, it will be there. But if you need to, just contact us. We'll be publishing it on our social media too. It's great. And also, if you go to braintapresearch.com, you'll see all of our research publications. We've had like 4 different publications this year. We do a lot of research. We're doing one today. We actually here in New Bern, North Carolina, where I'm at, we're doing some live readings with some people just to see the flow between using the app alone, using the app with the headset, and we're going to be publishing those results because we did it already with the college, Valencia College down in Florida. They're doing one with wellness, with mindfulness. We took the professor's mindfulness message and we made it brain tap encoded. And so half the group is using that and half the group's not. But we wanted to have a baseline study here so we could validate if the information in Florida was correct.
That's super cool. Hey, and so how do you measure the brain waves? Is it EEG or?
We have both. We use the Wavi. We also use a device called the NeuroInfinity. We also use the Muse, which is an easy way to do it. There's an extra app, not their app, but there's an app that somebody built that does live streams of the brain waves. And that's the most economical. It's only $200. And then we also we have our own HRV that I helped to create that will measure ECG, they call it. It's been correlated with EEG, which means we don't know the hemispheres like we can with the other devices, but it'll tell us how the primary brainwaves, and it's a lot less money than having to get the EEG equipment out. Plus, it only takes 3 to 5 minutes. So depending on what we want to accomplish, if we're trying to do dementia studies, we're going to use the full EEG. If we're just looking at the nervous system and relaxing, then we're going to use the HRV.
Interesting. That's so great. I'm getting my doctorate in leadership psychology, and my thesis, my dissertation is going to be on how does the brain of a follower react to certain leadership types behavior, different types of behavior of a leader. And I'm using, you might know him, Paul Zak. He has he calls himself a neuroeconomist, and he has a startup, and it's called Neuroscience as a Service. So it's linked to Apple, Fitbit, other heart rate, but it measures heart rate variability, and it gives you 2 data points. Again, not where in the brain, but it gives you immersion. So how much am I immersed? And it's probably pretty high right now. And it gives you psychological safety. So how calm.
I'd love to know more about that because we do a lot of work with like this. It's BioStrap. We just did a competition, our company against their company, and we had an 80%. It does sleep studies, so we showed an 80% improvement in sleep efficiency within a 2-week period. So they were doing it. We asked people to do it at least 2 times a day to get that result. So.
Oh, cool. Hey, so it's called getimmersion.com. It's a startup, and they are very much in the entertainment industry. They are in LA, so they don't go into health and wellness and sleep. But it's just an interesting way to measure what happens in the brain based on peripheral nervous system movement.
Well, we're always open to helping people with their studies. I'm the dean of brain-based medicine at Quantum University, so we do a lot with PhD students. We just helped a student do a sleep study with coal miners in Australia, and we had about a 40% improvement of sleep efficiency with coal miners. And the first thing we had to do is get them off alcohol. I mean, that was terrible. I mean, we couldn't even get any scans for the first week because they were drinking so much before they went to bed, and that just kills the brain. I mean, when we showed it to them, though, it got them to stop drinking. We showed them, here's what your brain looks like on alcohol.
And that thing tells me, of course, I don't drink a lot, but in the like weekend, if I have a glass, especially red wine, oh my God, it's like, it's instead of 50, 51, 54, the lowest, it gets to 62, 63. It's ridiculous what alcohol does.
If you go to my Instagram, you'll see some of my sleep scores. They were blown away because if I get below a 90, I'm upset. Even I had one that I posted. I only slept 2.5 hours and still got a 90. So because it was almost all deep sleep. If you can get at least an hour of deep sleep, we find, and 2 hours of REM, usually you score pretty good on those apps.
I get it.
Yeah. And it's and I always do a little breathing exercise as I'm going to bed. I'd usually do the 4-8 breath, to really down-regulate my sympathetic system, especially if I had a stressful day, because sometimes I'll be going, and it's time to go to bed. That's not the best way to do it, right? It's best to unwind, but if you're at a show or you're traveling, you can't. You got to do what you have to do.
So is it the 2-4-8 breathing? 2 in.
I'm doing the 4-8. So you breathe into the count of 4. Breathe out to the count of 8, or we'll do the box breathing, 4 in, hold it, 4 out, then hold it for 4, and just keep doing that box breathing, depending upon what we, I like to mix it up a little bit. Of course, then if I'm needing energy instead of going to sleep, I'll do something like the breath of fire or something like, get the breath going. And I mean, I'll be driving and I'll feel a little tired. Instead of getting a coffee, I'll just do breath of fire for 10 or 15 minutes, and I'm buzzing, getting that pranic energy through the body and waking up every cell, that makes a big difference.
Yeah, it's amazing. Hey, how about, what does movement do to the brain?
Movement is necessary. If you don't move, your brain is going to atrophy and die. Our brain became as large as it is because of exercise and movement. That's why I say that in order to have proper brain health, you need a mindfulness practice like brain tap, but you need to also be moving and breathing. That's where the yoga comes in, or Tai Chi, or dance. And if you're not getting up and moving, like they have different devices you can get for your computer screen, like every hour. I stand almost all day now, since about 3 years ago when I read the articles about sitting. I can sit, I have a chair here, but usually I find that if I sit too long, my back starts hurting, and it just doesn't work for me. So I'd rather just stand. And then, but also I have to get away from the computer. So usually at the top of the hour, whenever I'm done with the meeting, I'll walk outside. I don't, some people out there smoking or whatever, but I just walk out, just get a little sunshine, get a little vitamin D, break up the scene, get away from it. Because even though the screen looks to be a fluid thing, our brain is actually measuring every pixel and when it changes. Just like in Rain Man, when he knew all the toothpicks, our brain knows that information. It's just not giving it to us because it's not useful. Where some people like that have that kind of Asperger kind of brain, they don't know why they do it either, but their brain just calculates all that information. Our brain is doing that. It's just, that's why it's taxing to sit behind a computer screen. If you saw the screen of somebody's brain after they did computer games for a couple hours, man, I'm glad I never got into computer games. Now, my grandson, we limit his time when he's with us, because I showed him, I said, and he's young, he's 8 years old, so he should not have any problems with his brain. But even his brain starts to look like an alcoholic's brain when they get on the computer too long.
Tell me more about that. Like, is it the reward system? Is it like, oh, I need more? I see it in my boys, and we limit it to weekends only.
Yeah. But then beta brain creates dopamine. So the dopamine receptors keep getting hit. And it's kind of like the rats that they said they could give them sugar or they could have sex, and they would go for the sugar every time because the dopamine hit. They wouldn't even go. I mean, nobody would think that's logical, right? Especially for an animal, but because they wanted that dopamine hit that sugar gives them. So the computers do the same thing. So whether it's a single shooter game or anything else, the brain is being taxed. So, I mean, we're doing a study with some of these EAS professional teams. They have professional athletes playing these computer games, and they carve out, right? They think that's the way to do it. And we were showing them how bad that is for their brain, that what their brain really needs is a high fiber, and maybe to step away from the game every once in a while and reboot. So we showed them how they could regain 80% of the energy just by doing a brain tap session. And some will do it, some won't. I mean, there are kids that actually wear diapers playing these computer games so they don't have to get up and go to the bathroom. So, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, because that dopamine response, all addictions are pretty much dopamine receptor addictions. So we have to figure out a new way to do that. And, basically, when your brain's, there's a good book called Finding Your Perfect High by John Marshall. And it's an old book, so I think it's still in print. But I used that book as kind of a guide when I was doing the programs for DUIs for the state of Arizona, because he was talking about the brain, when it's addicted, it doesn't really want the substance. It wants balance, but it doesn't know how to get it there. So when we're in a state of balance, we have this state of flow. We just feel good. And everybody's seeking that, but it's kind of elusive, especially when we get hit with stress. Yeah. And so some people, the dopamine gives us that hit that keeps us motivated, keeps us going. And of course, dopamine leads to adrenaline addiction, and people just want the excitement, and they're always looking for what's the next game, and things like that.
So it's painful to hear that, and I can see it. I can just see addictive behavior when they have been on there. But so you say it's important to take breaks?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, I would say that with our grandson, we don't let him play for more than 45 minutes, and he gets 15 minutes to go do something else, go drink. And a lot of times we get him away from it doing something else, and he forgets about it. It satisfied him. But as long as he's sitting there, if he's, we're in a society now where everybody's bored. So like my kids, they joke about it now because they're saying it to their kids. But I used to say there's no boring times, only boring people. We need to make you more interesting, so because it's impossible to be bored in this universe. There's too much going on. But what they're looking for is they're looking for somebody to entertain them instead of entertain. We need people who can entertain themselves, can think for themselves. One of my big pet peeves is that people don't know how to think anymore. They look to the news for their medical advice, or they look outside themselves. And the analogy is, when you look at an egg is life when it breaks from the inside, but it's death when it breaks from the outside. So we have to develop these inner skills so that we can handle this external world in a way that it doesn't crush us. But if we're the world isn't going to support us any way that we want. Everyone in the world is out for themselves, and that's normal, because that's the kind of thing it is. So we have to kind of look out for ourselves and build our own happiness and create our own economy, if you will. And I say we live in an energy economy. So if we let energy vampires drain us of our energy and our life and our time, then there's a physiological thing that's happening there. We share biophotons, we share energy, and they've proven that now. So we actually so who you hang out with actually can change your DNA. We know that now. It's a scientific fact. So it's not like when people say birds of a feather flock together, it's because they start all sharing in the same kind of, they even say that if our gut biome is the same, we'll seek out people with the same gut biome, and things like that. So we're not just these physical beings running around, thinking and acting. We're much more. I like to remind people that we're spiritual beings having a physical reality, not a physical being trying to be more spiritual or trying to be more of something else. That's the problem we have, is that we know there's something greater within us, but it's just out of our grasp until we settle down. Like the Bible says, be still and know God. We have to slow down our brain and get that monkey mind to just be quiet for a little bit, so that we can listen to that wisdom that we all have. Our genetic wisdom, we know what to do if we're really honest with ourselves. It's just a matter of slowing everything down, because life happens, instead of life happening through us, it happens to us. So we need to be more in the flow state.
I love that. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So is there anything else I can answer for you before we wrap up the call? We went a little long, but that's okay.
I'm gonna try my sleep program I'm going to do it for 21 days.
Okay, great.
I'm just super grateful. Thank you.
Well, thank
Very
you.
inspiring.
Just one more question for you then before we end is, if somebody's thinking about doing brain tap but haven't made the decision, since you saw it at your practitioners, you saw it online, you did these things, what would you say to them that they should or could do to learn more or to explore more about brain tap?
Try it, and try it over a period of time, and see. I mean, I really feel I'm not procrastinating. I'm just taking it, doing it, putting it on my head, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is self-care, and it's good for me.
Yeah. Well,
And
thanks.
it's
Yeah.
a very concrete way to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Self-care.
That's great. Yeah, and so many people don't take care of them. They're so busy taking care of everybody else, they don't take care of
Yes.
themselves. So that's a good point.
Yes.
The caregivers need to take care of themselves as well. So, well,
Yeah.
thank you for setting this up so we could talk and get your questions answered. And we appreciate you helping Brain Tap Nation out by sharing your experience and asking all those good questions. And so, look forward to hearing about your success. And you do have my email, so you can get a hold of Heidi with us and set up a time for me to be a guest on your Instagram. We can do that easily.
That sounds amazing.
Okay. All right. See you later, Kat.
Thanks so much.